Hi, this is the presentation by Kelly and Melba. We will be discussing the literary review of music education for improving reading skills in children and adolescents with dyslexia. The purpose of this review was to illustrate the effectiveness of music education on the reading skill spectrum in children and adolescents with dyslexia by providing information gathered from studies that contain the selection of criteria of randomized controlled trials and dyslexic children and adolescents attending either private or public schools. For the purpose of this article, dyslexia, also known as developmental dyslexia or specific reading disability, is described as a specific learning disorder that has a neurobiological origin marked by difficulties with fluent recognition of words and poor spelling in people who actually have average or above average intelligence. It has been hypothesized that musical training may be available to remediate timing difficulties, improve pitch perception, and increase spatial awareness, providing skills necessary to develop language and literacy. Criteria for considerations within this review consisted of picking randomized controlled trials and studies that contained intervention approaches. This included eligible forms of music education where individuals or group music lessons were provided to the students by a music advisor or music school teacher. These lessons were provided as part of a general curriculum or as an extracurricular activity, exposing the students to key elements of music such as rhythm, melody, and harmony. Intervention approaches such as the Suzuki method, Dalcozzi method, the German Orff Schulwerk system, and the Hungarian method were used to provide students with general learning processes. The Suzuki method teaches musical notation until there is an adequate grounding in playing skills and the development of music memory, and this is usually taught in groups. The Dalcozzi method is a group music teaching through eurythmics. The German Orff Schulwerk system combines choral singing, oral training, movement, improvisation, activities using pitch and non-pitch percussion instruments, and the Hungarian method is very similar to this. Other criteria considerations included studies that reported at least one of the following primary outcomes: oral reading skills, reading comprehension, reading fluency, phonological awareness, and spelling. Secondary outcomes were self-esteem and improved academic performance with short-term, medium-term, and long-term examination. The electronic search for these studies was conducted in the year 2011 and revised in the year 2012. It used various databases without applying search terms of dates or language preferences. This decreased potential bias. The list of databases included the Cochrane Central Register for Controlled Trials, Medline, Embase, CNOW+, PsycInfo, ERIC, Lilacs, WorldCat, the Arts and Humanities Citation Index, the Conference Proceedings Citation Index, Social Sciences and Humanities, and the WHO International Clinical Trials Registry Platform. In addition, authors checked the references in the identified studies for additional citations and contacted the study's authors and various experts through email to collect unpublished data. Through this search, authors were able to retrieve 876 citations after removing duplicates using EndNote. Here we take a look at the ASHA level of evidence table, and for this research, it was a level 1B assessment because the authors sought to find randomized controlled trials. Here is the study flow diagram. Using the clinical condition and the intervention of interest as the criteria for the study selection, 6 primary studies had the possibility of being included since they mentioned musical education for children with dyslexia. However, they were excluded because they were not a randomized controlled trial or because they did not use reading skills as an outcome. None of the studies fulfill the author's inclusion criteria for randomized controlled trial studies making it difficult to evaluate the effectiveness of music education adequately. Due to this lack of high-quality evidence in basing a decision on the implementation of music education for dyslexic children, the authors recommended the researchers engage in further formal testing of music education for children and adolescents with dyslexia, while also considering economic evaluation as a potential variable. Again, there's no evidence available from randomized controlled trials, and this warrants further research via randomized controlled trials. Thus, we cannot report a lack of evidence. A level of evidence. So, as I had mentioned just now, the researchers were not able to assess any literature that matched their criteria. There is a total absence of randomized control studies about music education's effect on dyslexic children and teens. The authors claim there was a lack of high-quality evidence and little statistical evidence available about the benefits of music education in dyslexic children. However, some studies show a connection between music education and improved grades, reading disabilities in dyslexic children. So as mentioned, there were no results, so researchers were unable to assess bias. The search was done by professionals, specifically a biologist with expertise in evidence-based practice and a musician with expertise in design of educational trials in psychometry. However, here are some of the literature review's own potential biases. It was very particular. They did not use a search date or language limitations. The search included unpublished work, which is questionable, and the search was conducted by professionals, which is great, but they might have some personal investment in this subject. Here is a look at the unused method of bias assessment of the literature. This was based off guidance from the Cochrane Handbook for Systematic Reviews of Intervention. They did not have any applicable studies, and they would have assessed based on the following. It would have been a scale of bias from low, high, or unclear, sequence generation, allocation concealment, blinding, incomplete outcome data, selective outcome reporting, validity and reliability of outcome measures used, and other sources of bias. So here the researchers explained the lacking qualities of the 6 full-text articles taken from the 876 citation results. These 6 articles were excluded from the study because they were not randomized controlled trials for testing music education for improving the reading skills in dyslexic children and adolescents. The authors claim these studies lacked high-quality evidence, which makes it impossible to evaluate the effectiveness of music education adequately. The basic reasons for research were 3 had no control, 1 had no reading outcome, 1 had a theoretical discussion, and 1 had a heterogenic sample. If you take a look at the chart, you will see that they specifically lay out the reasons for exclusion, no clinical trial, no reading outcome, 2 had no control group, so essentially nothing met their criteria. They also did have a plan for coding that was not used because of lack of results. The authors plan to carry out subgroup analyses to explore possible differential effects of intervention depending on the duration of musical training, short, medium, and long term, the type of musical training, the method used, or even the specific instrument the child played, and the age range of participants, children being 6 to 12 years old and adolescents being 13 to 18. Overall, it was a very interesting study, but this systematic review's lack of results might prove more important and impactful than if the authors had found results. It displays a clear need for future modified studies. It spelled out the specific type of future studies, which is a need for randomized control trials to test the relationship between dyslexia and music education. The researchers also called for the consideration of variables such as socioeconomic status within future studies, which is a very important aspect of research. The authors of this systematic review also plan to revise and write a follow-up systematic review when they find higher quality evidence provided by future randomized control studies. The obvious con in this study was the total absence of findings that fit criteria, which possibly indicates their search criteria was too specific. Here are our references, and we thank you for listening. We look forward to your feedback, and we will be happy to answer any questions. Thanks so much.